Welcome to episode 24 of the Denver Crux podcast. And today we're going to be talking about fitness, health, with the overarching idea of longevity. So to start off, I think about some of the fitness motivations that I've had over the years. And I think a lot of those are shared with a lot of people listening to this podcast today. So I think when we're younger, overall, we have different motivations. And speaking for myself, I can think about the competitive bodybuilding scene. I can think about the competitive powerlifting scene. I can think about high school and collegiate wrestling, other performance-based sports. That was kind of the motivation. How much can I lift? How does the body look like in the mirror and everything when you're at the gym and everything? And so I think a lot of those are very common motivations when we're starting off this whole idea behind fitness. Later on, I think that tends to shift, and I think it should shift. Obviously, it's kind of like a set of branches. It can go in all different directions. Is there anything wrong with focusing on aesthetics when we are lifting and doing any type of weightlifting or doing cardio, trying to get leaner? Absolutely not. Aesthetics, I think, play a major factor, and that can remain a very large motivation in a lot of people's fitness journey. But I think something that's even more important, whether or not we want to admit it, is what is fitness doing for us internally? And that's what we're going to be focusing on today quite a bit. One of the big motivations behind today's episode is I recently read a few books that really hit home a very important aspect. Those two books were Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia and Forever Strong by Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. They're books based on longevity and basically what fitness and health does for us on an internal level. One of the things that Peter Attia talks about in his book is the idea of medicine 3.0. So basically medicine 1.0 was like back in the day, basically the starting roots of medicine, and you can kind of think about ancient times when people first started discovering some of these very basic remedies, right? And then time went on, we started to get more technology, we moved into medicine 2.0, and that's kind of still where we are today to some degree. And so we started learning how to cure things through pharmaceuticals. We started to learn how to do modern surgeries and different type of interventions. We have a lot of different medications that can help us out and sometimes cure certain things. But medicine 3.0, what that is really about is instead of waiting for an ailment to occur, instead of waiting for an inevitable injury to occur, why don't we attack it before it happens? That's what medicine 3.0 is all about. Let's not wait until it happens. Let's actually address the situation, and let's go ahead and do what we can do to prevent it and greatly mitigate its devastation that it can have on the body. So basically, from a contextual standpoint, let's not wait until the bad blood work comes in. Let's not wait until we get that injury and now we have to worry about what is the quick, easy fix. And of course, in medicine 2.0, we're always looking for the magic pill. We're looking for the magic surgery that can fix us. And it's never going to be as effective as medicine 3.0. Having a prediction that it's going to happen, and in reality, it is going to happen. Right now, if you're listening to this and you're 100% healthy, you haven't received your diagnosis yet, but we all have them, every single person. We all have, whether it be a cancer diagnosis, whether it be a cardiovascular disease diagnosis, whether it be a diabetic diagnosis, we just haven't received it yet. But something is going to come about at some point. Maybe it's tomorrow, maybe it's in 2 years, maybe it's in 5 years, maybe it's in 30 years. But there is something that is going to happen. So let's get to the forefront of it. That's Medicine 3.0. So another big concept that is addressed is we're talking about the concept of longevity. What is the difference between lifespan and health span? And these are two additional things that Dr. Peter Attia talks about. Lifespan is how long we live, and I think traditionally that's how we've always thought about longevity. How many years do we live? How long can we live? But I really liked how he referenced health span. Of that timeline, how long are we healthy for? Because if we live until 120, what is the point of that if your last 30 years, your last 20 years, your last 10 years are spent in the hospital bed as a patient? What's the point if your last couple of years are spent bedridden? What type of life is that? Not nearly as good as if we get ahead and if we bring our body to an optimal state of performance. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're going to chat a lot about that. All right. So before we get into this, let me have a more formal introduction. My name is Hazel. You guys may know me from the Denver Crux podcast, or maybe if you know me out in the real world. All right. I studied exercise physiology at Florida Atlantic University. I had the pleasure of having a multitude of amazing mentors and people that were just real revolutionaries within the field. And I've always had a aspiration and just a love for health and fitness. I think it's important to live well, and it gives us a lot in this world, having good health. Today, I'm going to be talking about the world of health, wellness, fitness, longevity. And obviously, I am not a doctor. I'm not a physician. I don't do research in the field anymore. That's not anything that I do. However, just from my own external learning and reading some of these books from some of these people who I'll be referencing, I'll be pulling various case studies from the NIH, JAMA, PubMed, a lot of verified studies that have been conducted by people much smarter than myself. As a disclaimer for people listening, I would like to note here on the forefront that a lot of this is going to be oversimplified. And obviously these type of case studies, no, they're not black and white in reality, but I am going to oversimplify them for two reasons. Number one, because of time. I'm not going to spend hours and hours and hours going over all of the background and the actual details behind a lot of these studies. A lot of times I'll just be jumping to the conclusion and kind of what did we learn from it. So if you're more interested in the details and the background behind these studies, please, I will list them, and you have the opportunity to go ahead and look them up and really deep dive them. Second reason is that I'll be summarizing a lot of these is because they're all pointing in the same direction. As I was creating the show notes today, I found just dozens and dozens and dozens of papers and various studies. And one of the common denominators that I found when I was going through these is they all point in the same direction. Nobody is debating these conclusions that we're going to be talking about today. It's important to be healthy. No expert is denying this. Exercise is good. Eating healthy is a good thing. Getting sleep is a good thing. We're going to be deep diving it a little bit more, but nobody is denying it. And so we're going to be trying to really capitalize on the importance of it today. All right, so let's keep moving on. All right, so Why should we exercise? I think that's something that's important to ask yourself. Why exercise? And I think a big reason is because exercise has a direct effect on how you interface with the life that you've built. Everyone listening to this, you've built a life for yourself. You grew up, you got a career, you started making money, you purchased a home, you have a family, you have, maybe a spouse and children, you have hobbies, you have passions. These are all the things about living a life. You have built that life for yourself. So the question is, how are you going to move through your life that you have spent your entire life building? A lot of times what ends up happening is when we get ailments, or as we age and we get naturally, illnesses start to come about, or we start to get weaker, or we start to lose mobility kind of naturally. And if we don't address that situation, we're going to start to move in a much poorer fashion. We're not going to be able to do the things that we love to do anymore. Now, some things we just won't be able to do. If you were a high school football player, you probably shouldn't be playing a sport as violent as football when you're 80 years old. But the hobbies that we do adapt. But the question is, as your hobbies adapt, are you going to be able to do those things? Are you going to be able to execute basic life functions? There's a lot of situations to where there's this snowball effect that happens. And what ends up occurring is you're trying to do certain things, and you're going out there and you're trying to live a certain life. You're trying to travel. You're trying to go to the grocery store. You're trying to go out on a certain adventure, and your body hurts, or you're not able to do it, and you feel like you're a hindrance on the people that you're with or on society, and you feel like it's just not worth it. So that's what we're trying to avoid. And here's the good news. It's all avoidable, and we can fix a lot of it. And so that's what we're going to be talking about here. That is a major, major reason to exercise. All right, let's start off with a quick study. So this is going to be a 2018 PubMed meta-analysis, which looked at 38 different studies, which had 2 million subjects. This study was called Muscular Strength as a Predictor of All-Cause Mortality in an Apparently Healthy Population, a systematic review and meta-analysis of data from approximately 2 million men and women. Okay, so what was the conclusion of this? An overwhelming result that higher muscular strength led to a decrease in all-cause mortality. So mortality basically means how someone is going to die. All right, it means death has found them in some way. Now, when we talk about mortality also, there's some different ways that we can define it. I'd like to reference the book Outlive again by Dr. Peter Attia. And when he talks about mortality, he talks about the 4 horsemen. And those 4 horsemen are the 4 major killers. And those are cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, such as Alzheimer's, and various metabolic diseases. And probably the most notable metabolic disease that we're going to be focusing on today is diabetes. So let's go ahead and start there with diabetes. I'm going to pull an excerpt from Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia. Today, over 11% of the US adult population, which is 1 in 9, has clinical type 2 diabetes, according to a 2022 CDC report, including more than 29% of adults over the age of 65. Another 38% of US adults, more than 1 in 3, meet at least one of the criteria for pre-diabetes. That means that nearly half of the population is either on the road to type 2 diabetes or they're already there. In 2020, a little more than 100,000 deaths were attributed to type 2 diabetes, a fraction of the number due to either cardiovascular disease or cancer. By the numbers, it barely qualifies as a horseman. But I believe that the actual death toll due to type 2 diabetes is much greater and that we undercount its true impact. Patients with diabetes have a much greater risk of cardiovascular disease as well as cancer and Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. One could argue that diabetes with related metabolic dysfunction is one thing that all these conditions have in common. So when I read that, I got very intrigued with that, and I wanted to explore that a lot more. And turns out there's a lot of research that is linking diabetes to the other horseman diseases that we talked about. Okay. So chatting about diabetes, we can't talk about diabetes any further without talking about the concept of insulin resistance. Okay. So what is insulin resistance? At its core, insulin resistance is a carbohydrate tolerance disorder. Okay. Reading here in my notes, insulin is a hormone made by our pancreas. Its job is to move sugar, which for all simplified purposes, we're just going to call blood glucose, from the bloodstream into the cells. But high blood glucose over time is extremely toxic. So insulin has a hard time keeping up when we are in a state of insulin resistance. So more is needed. Eventually you develop a resistance to this insulin. Insulin resistance can lead to being in a state of pre-diabetic. So what is pre-diabetic? Well, if we want to get technical about it, when you check out your blood report, you can see that if you had something between 101 and 125 milligrams per deciliter, you're in a pre-diabetic stage. That is going to be your fasting blood glucose. That's why before you go to the doctors and get your blood work done, they say, don't eat or drink anything for 12 hours except for water, because they want to find what's your fasting blood glucose. Okay. So basically what insulin does, if I really want to just break this down super Barney style, and let's just do that, keep it simple, insulin is a glucose transporter. So we consume carbohydrates, and now we've got all this glucose, all right, or broken down carbohydrate, just swimming around in the bloodstream. It's just hanging out and it wants to go someplace, but it can't go anywhere alone. And so when carbohydrates get consumed, our pancreas receives a signal and it releases this hormone called insulin. And insulin is just basically a taxi cab. It's a taxi cab and it swims through the bloodstream and it picks up blood glucose as a passenger and it drives it to cells. Now the question is, where is it going to drive the blood glucose to? Because glucose in this example is a nutrient that we're going to use to recover. So ideally, we want this glucose, this nutrient, to go to muscle. All right, we want it to go to muscle. We want it to feed our muscles and make us anabolic and negate muscle breakdown. Okay, but that doesn't always happen. So if our body is insulin resistant or in a state of insulin resistance, that taxi cab, that's the insulin. It's trying to push through the cell and get into the muscle, but it just can't do it. And so what does the pancreas do? It releases more and more and more insulin to help shove it through that cell. Okay. Now, if it can't do that, and we've got all this extra blood glucose just hanging out in the bloodstream, our blood becomes extremely toxic. That's not good. A lot of bad things happen when that happens. Okay. Most notably, if we just have this toxic blood, basically, because it's saturated with blood glucose, that blood glucose ultimately has to go somewhere, and it's gonna end up getting stored as fat. And I'm not only talking about your subcutaneous fat on your body. I'm also talking about it's getting shoved in between your organs. It's causing inflammation, right? And that's why there's this link between diabetes and other things such as cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, neurodegenerative diseases, right? It's doing other things. So we can't reach a state of insulin resistance. Besides that, what else can this chronic state of high blood sugar do? Well, there's a lot of bad things, all right? Think about people that are diabetic, okay? This can cause distal neuropathy. So if you're feeling any type of tingling or kind of insensitivity with your fingertips or your feet or anything like that, that's going to be that distal neuropathy. It can cause blindness. It can lead to amputations, okay? That's why a lot of times people who are diabetic, they get their feet chopped off, stuff like that, all right? I don't think anybody here wants that, all right? And besides that, it makes us less muscular and more fat if we are insulin resistant, right? We can't allow that to happen, all right? That's how we start reaching obesity, and a lot of other bad things internally start to happen. So why does insulin resistance happen? Let's get into that. Lack of activity, okay? If we aren't exercising and we're not creating muscle and we are not increasing our VO2 max and we're just overall, we're not active from an exercise standpoint, mind you, then we are very much leading ourselves towards becoming pre-diabetic and insulin resistant, okay? Excess nutrition, meaning we're eating too much. So we're consuming food, but it's got no place to go because we're not giving it the signal that it needs to get into our muscles, okay? And lack of sleep, okay? That has its own separate thing. We're gonna get into that, okay? So those are major components, not all the components that can lead us to becoming insulin resistant, right? As we age, if you're over 40, you've got high body fat, you're really in a dangerous place to becoming insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, and ultimately diabetic. You're really towing the line right there. Now, the simple answer for those of you that are getting a little bit sick and tired of hearing my voice at this point, the simple answer right now, how to fix all this, start to exercise. Start to eat better, all right? That's the overall gist. But what does that stuff really mean, and how motivated are you to do it? That's what we're gonna start getting into even more. All right, I'm going to read a 2010 PubMed study here. It's called Exercise and Type 2 Diabetes. This is from the American College of Sports Medicine and the American Diabetes Association. It's a joint position statement. The abstract. Although physical activity is a key element in the prevention and management of type 2 diabetes, many with this chronic disease do not become or remain regularly active. High-quality studies establishing the importance of exercise and fitness in diabetes were lacking until recently, but it is now well established that participation in regular physical activity improves blood glucose control and can prevent or delay type 2 diabetes, along with positively affecting lipids, blood pressure, cardiovascular events, mortality, and quality of life. Structured interventions combining physical activity and modest weight loss have been shown to lower type 2 diabetes by up to 58% in high-risk populations. That's huge. You can go ahead and you can just chop your chances more so than half if you become physically active and you start doing actual exercise. Continuing on, Diabetes has become a widespread epidemic primarily because of the increasing prevalence and incidence of type 2 diabetes. And they're contrasting that with just type 1 diabetes. According to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention, in 2007, almost 24 million Americans had diabetes, with 1/4 of those, or 6 million, undiagnosed. Currently, it is estimated that almost 60 million US residents also have prediabetes, a condition in which the blood glucose levels are above normal, thus greatly increasing their risk for type 2 diabetes. Lifetime risk estimates suggest that 1 in 3 Americans born in 2000 or later will develop diabetes, but in high-risk ethnic populations, closer to 50% may develop it. Type 2 diabetes is a significant cause of premature mortality and morbidity related to cardiovascular disease, blindness, kidney and nerve damage, and amputation. Although regular physical activity may prevent or delay diabetes and its complications, most people with type 2 diabetes are not active. That is too bad. That is too bad. They should be active. All right, moving on to the conclusion. Exercise plays a major role in the prevention and control of insulin resistance, prediabetes, GDM, type 2 diabetes, and diabetes-related health complications. Both aerobic and resistance training improves insulin action, at least acutely, and can assist with the management of BG levels, lipids, BP, CV risk, mortality, and QOL. But exercise must be undertaken regularly to have continued benefits, and likely include regular training of varying types. Most persons with type 2 diabetes can perform exercises safely as long as certain precautions are taken. The inclusion of an exercise program or other means of increasing the overall physical activity is critical for optimal health in individuals with type 2 diabetes. Okay, so biggest takeaway from that paper, we can reduce a lot of our chances of getting diabetes and combat this if we exercise. And real quick moving forward, because we're going to mention exercise a lot within a lot of these case studies that are getting done. Somebody put it to me like this once, and it always stuck. There's a reason why construction workers aren't jacked. And I'm just kind of randomly choosing construction workers because that's what was said to me in the quote. But construction workers, they do a lot of work all day, every day. They're out there, they're shoveling, they're putting asphalt on the road. I mean, they're doing a lot of stuff. It's a lot of labor. It's a lot of hard work. I would never take anything away from that. But that long duration hard work is not exercise. You're not building muscle, even though you're working hard in that certain example, and you're not increasing your VO2 max, which is basically your cardiovascular engine. All right, that's just that engine that really is going to be a big metric of your cardiovascular health. You're not doing either of those because you're not pushing yourself. You're kind of just doing really long-term, 10-hour, 12-hour, 14-hour maybe days out there. You're sweating a lot. It's really exhausting, but you're just draining yourself. You're not building muscle and you're not improving your cardiovascular health. So I just want to point that out, that it's different. And so when we talk about exercise, we're talking about actual specific exercises, whether that be cardiovascular or resistance training. All right, this is a 2020 study by NIH, National Library of Medicine. It's called Role of Skeletal Muscle in Insulin Resistance and Glucose Uptake. Skeletal muscle is responsible for 80% of postprandial glucose uptake from circulation. 80%. So real quick, we'll chat about this. What that means is muscle is responsible for getting 80% of your glucose within the blood out of the blood and making it less toxic. So what does that mean for you? If you don't have a lot of muscle, then it's really not going to be able to do the job of getting that glucose out of the blood, okay? So not having muscle makes you more predisposed to being insulin resistant. which means it makes you more predisposed to being fat, obese, and having multiple cardiovascular, metabolic, and degenerative diseases. You have to have muscle. As Dr. Gabriel Lyon says, muscle is the organ of longevity. Muscle does a lot for us. They're not just mere muscles that we flex in the mirror and we're like, yeah, I've got the biggest biceps in town. That's not what it is. Muscle does a lot more for us. Pre-diabetic individuals have a 50% chance of developing type 2 diabetes within 5 years of diagnosis, and are also at higher risk of developing other metabolic disorders such as cancer, cardiometabolic complications, neuropathy, and sarcopenia that can ultimately lead to death. So sarcopenia, what is that? So when we lose muscle, that's called atrophy. Sarcopenia talks about the excessive loss of muscle as we age. All right, so really as we age, we get older, the body cares less and less and less about staying jacked. All right, we want to stay jacked because we've just been talking about what does muscle do for us internally. All right, so we have to battle sarcopenia. All right, continuing on. Pulling a study from, again, this is NIH. This is called Association of Muscular Strength and Incidence of Type 2 Diabetes. This is a 2019 study. The conclusion, I'm just going to jump to that. A moderate level of muscular strength is associated with a lower risk of type 2 diabetes independent of our cardiorespiratory fitness. Okay. And we'll talk more about this on how just getting to a moderate level of strength. Okay. In this one, some of the background, participants with the middle level of muscular strength had 32% lower risk of development of type 2 diabetes. So even just getting to like barely average, that helped them 32% mitigate diabetes. All right, and I want to emphasize that the standards of reaching average fitness or this moderate fitness is very, very easy. This is not like you're going to the gym crushing it 6 days a week. All right, this is like minimal effort to get to these standards. So get to that gym, put on muscle, train your cardiovascular system. It's important. All right, I'm going to finish up here some of this. So kind of closing out all our chats about diabetes, insulin resistance. How do we know if we are insulin resistant? So remember, basically insulin resistance, or we can say, how do we know when we're pre-diabetic so we can mitigate reaching the state of diabetes? All right. How do we know? Well, the answer is simple blood work. All right. You can get your blood work. You can get an A1C test done that's on your blood work. All right. And basically, your A1C test, if you are between 5.7 and 6.5, you are technically considered pre-diabetic. So if you're between those ranges, you know that you got to fix something quick. Once you hit 6.5 plus, you have type 2 diabetes now. Okay. So you have the opportunity to go ahead and look at that blood report, see what your numbers are, and address it. We'll chat real quick about stress. Chronic stress elevates cortisol levels. One of the forms of chronic stress is a lack of sleep, okay? Now, talking about cortisol levels, that's basically a stress hormone that gets released. Now, it's not all bad because you can't make exercise gains without cortisol. We would never want to eliminate cortisol. I know that word gets really demonized within popular media and everything, but we do need it, all right? Now, when cortisol is up, this causes elevated blood sugar levels. Basically, our bodies are designed to fight or flee, and so a lot of times stress will naturally create these elevated cortisol levels and the stress that we have created for ourselves, right? And you can think of some of the like first world problems, stress that we have here in this day and age in this country. People popping on the news channel, looking at politics, and they're just freaking out, and that's just one example. Social media, how many friends do I have on my top 8? Did such and such unfollow me? How many followers do I have? Just all this crazy stuff. That's creating stress. And none of that stuff are even real problems. Now, back in the day, a saber-toothed tiger chasing you was a real problem, right? And so fight or flee response. But these days, we don't have that saber-toothed tiger to run away from and use that blood glucose. And so again, that stuff just chills in the system. It's hanging around our bloodstream, just kind of floating around. It's got nowhere to go, and it gets stored as fat often, and it gets stored as fat in between organs, in between our body, and that's when we start getting that inflammation. Cardiovascular risk goes up. It's a whole thing. All right, so don't be stressed out. Don't be watching TV and letting all these ridiculous things bother people. All right, moving on to the next segment of today's chat, cognitive decline. All right, so what does exercise have to do with cognitive decline? That's what we're going to chat about. It's been said that exercise is the number one means to battle cognitive decline. I'm looking here at a 2023 PubMed study called Preventative Strategies for Cognitive Decline and Dementia. Benefits of aerobic physical activity, especially open skill exercise, if you want to check out the paper. What is the conclusion of it? I'm oversimplifying. Physical inactivity is highly associated with an increased risk in developing dementia. Based on the results discussed in this review, physical activity and exercise interventions, especially aerobic interventions, may be an effective and economically attractive non-pharmacological strategy, which allows us to mitigate the negative effects of aging and disease on cognitive function. Therefore, daily physical activity and exercise should be recommended for older adults with and without cognitive impairment. I really like that they mentioned individuals with and without, because what's that saying is they're catching it ahead of time. You don't have to wait until you have dementia or diabetes or cardiovascular disease to start exercising. Don't wait for that bad blood work to come in. I'm not going to say it's too late, because it's never too late to start exercising, but you're going to be really behind the 8 ball. Do it early. Moving on to sleep, I'm looking at a 2018 study. This one is called Beta Amyloid Accumulation in the Human Brain After 1 Night of Sleep Deprivation. This is an NIH study, by the way. Conclusion: losing just 1 night of sleep led to an immediate increase in beta amyloid, which is a protein in the brain associated with Alzheimer's disease, according to a small new study by researchers at the National Institute of Health. In Alzheimer's disease, beta amyloid proteins clump together to form amyloid plaques, a hallmark of the disease. All right. So basically, when we sleep properly and we get a good night's rest, we are basically cleansing and we are just washing away that protein that starts the precursors to Alzheimer's. So we've got to get that sleep. All right, we're going to look a little bit more now, jumping into another study talking about how much sleep do we need. This is a Harvard Health Publishing study conducted by JAMA Neurology in 2021. It's labeled, "How Much Sleep Keeps Cognitive Decline at Bay." Getting too much or too little sleep may hurt your brain and lead to memory and thinking impairment, suggests a study published August 30th, 2021 by JAMA Neurology. Researchers analyzed the brain images, cognitive test results, and self-reported sleep habits of more than 4,400 older men and women around the world. Sleeping 6 hours or less per night, which was called short sleep, was associated with impaired cognition, mostly in memory, as well as an increase in amyloid beta, the protein that can form brain plaque, which is the hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. Sleeping, give me a second, kind of lost my place here. Sleeping 9 hours or more, considered long sleep, was also linked to cognitive problems, especially in decision making. And both short and long sleep were associated with higher body mass index, a measurement of body fat. More depressive symptoms and more napping compared with people who got 7 or 8 hours of sleep. So don't get too much. Don't be getting like over 9, and don't be getting less than 6. All right. Get some good sleep. And again, sleep is going to be also associated with cortisol release. And it's a real vicious cycle, because if we have too much cortisol release, we're going to have problems sleeping. And when we have problems sleeping and we're not sleeping, because we're in this hustle culture, which is so popular today, people trying to be on the grind and getting 4 hours, 5 hours a night and trying to get more done throughout the day, you're also going to be releasing cortisol, which has a snowball effect of negative results. So your sleep is important. All right. We're kind of moving on to something a little bit more abstract, and we're just talking about stress and healthy living as it relates to fitness. So overall, we should be having healthy relationships, platonic relationships, romantic relationships. We have to have people to share this life with. Maintain your relationships. Be able to have healthy, sustainable relationships. This kind of ties in with our hobbies. You've got to have hobbies and passions. They're extremely important. I think about how my hobbies have changed. Back in the day, I used to be a long-time high school and collegiate wrestler, and now I don't really do that high-impact wrestling anymore, that Greco-Roman or folk style of wrestling, because it's just too hard on the body. I switched over to some jiu-jitsu now, and jiu-jitsu is much smoother. It's very flowy. You don't need a lot of strength. Being explosive, powerful, super strong doesn't really help a lot in jiu-jitsu. It's really a kind of a slow chess match. But the advantages are, I'm a little bit older now. I don't wake up with joint pain. Everything is just kind of much smoother doing that type of sport. And you can adapt that to anything. Some of you might have played high school football or rugby in the past. Probably shouldn't be playing that as you get much, much, much older. Going to work with your broken arm in a cast isn't cool anymore. You have families to sustain. You have to keep that paycheck coming in. Things change. So adapt your hobbies, but find hobbies. All right. Just because you can't do the things that you did in the past doesn't mean that you can't find new hobbies. I'm always looking for new hobbies. I think about different hobbies that I've accumulated, and there's always something. I do a lot more reading now. I used to read just for academic purposes back in college, and now, reading fiction and adventure books and even a bunch of different nonfiction and just learning about different things, that in itself has become a passion of mine. There's a lot of different things that you guys can get into, if you need to find some maybe some group sports or something like that. If you want to find people to go to a book club with, or, go to, not that I'm promoting alcohol, I'm here on a fitness podcast, but, living here in Colorado, there's a lot of brewery meetups, going out to distilleries and everything, or just whatever you're into, but find something. Sitting on the couch watching TV is not a hobby. Every once in a while, if you want to do a movie and everything, but you've got to find different hobbies, and you've got to find a third place. A lot of time people go to work and they go home, and that's it, just back and forth. Find that third place. If it can be in the gym, that's a great third place. Find a fourth place, maybe find a fifth place, but find a place where you can relieve stress in a very healthy manner. All right. What are your future goals? Are you living in the past, only thinking about the past, or do you have future goals ahead? And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Have future goals, and don't let your body slow you down from those future goals. If you want to travel places, make sure you get your body in the shape to where you can do that. Like I said earlier, a lot of times people will not take that trip because their body can't do it. A lot of times we think that we're going to be a burden on society, that we can't move from A to B, and so why bother going on the trip? And here's the good news. It's 100% fixable. Exercise can fix you. And so take advantage of it and do the things that you want to do. Live the life that you built for yourself. All right. I'm reading a paper here called Biological and Physiological Effects of Physical Exercise. The authors are Weinberg and Gould. This is a 2015 paper. Physical exercise decreases anxiety, depression, dysfunctional, and psychotic behaviors, hostility, tension, phobias, and headaches. Physical exercise increases assertiveness, confidence, emotional stability, cognitive functioning, internal locus of control, positive body image, self-control, and sexual satisfaction. There's so many benefits mentally that come from physical exercise. You just got to get it going and start taking advantage of them. One of the things that wasn't listed here, but is definitely a thing, if you guys have ever heard of like a runner's high, those are basically those endorphins getting released when you do exercise. I'm not a big runner myself, unless it's with a plate carrier or a heavy backpack and I'm doing some rucking or just some heavy hiking. But endorphins are a thing. When you get in that gym and you start just pumping weights or you start doing your cardiovascular thing, you start to get this real nice euphoria. You start to release these things that your body just feels good. And that's basically your body telling you that exercise is a good thing and your body is rewarding you for doing what you're supposed to be doing. If you haven't felt that, get out there and try it. It's a thing. All right. It's not some made up ploy to get people to the gym. It is a thing. It feels good. All right. So moving on down the show notes, should I start gaining muscle and improving my overall fitness? So that may be a question that you're asking yourself. Should you start training? And I think I would ask another question is, do you ever wake up feeling like shit? Ask yourself that. I think a lot of people do. They wake up feeling like shit, or throughout the day, they just don't feel good. They're achy, they're hurting, they're just not mobile. And we have to be able to create some sort of motivation to answer the question, should we start exercising? Feeling like shit is definitely one of them. It is not natural to feel like shit. I want to put that out there. We should not be feeling that way. We might wake up feeling a little bit tired and groggy, but if your body's hurting and you're feeling kind of ill, kind of on the verge of sickness, but you're not actually sick, but you just feel like kind of just low energy, that's not natural. That's not something that you should be feeling. People that exercise, they don't feel that way. And neither do you. You don't have to feel that way, right? Big motivation, you should ask yourself, are you ambulatory? Can you move from A to B and can you go and do the things that you want to do? Can you do basic human functions? Things that you see most people doing, especially most younger people, I should say, doing just because you are older, and some people, depending on what age metric you want to use, I hear a lot of people saying, oh, well, I'm in my 40s now. And so, oh man, I just can't do this anymore or play this sport or lift weights or do anything like that. That shouldn't be the case. Now, the exception would be like football and rugby, right? But if you can't hop on a bicycle and, go and ride, or if you can't walk from A to B, or if you can't get in the gym and move some sort of weights, or if you can't be on an airplane and lift up your 30-pound luggage into the baggage compartment, there's some issues. That's a basic human function. You should be able to do that. A question you may ask yourself is, if you decide to start training, you may ask yourself, do I have adequate muscle? Do I have adequate muscle? Because you listen to this podcast now and you have learned that muscle plays a major role, 80% of the role in glucose disposal to prevent prediabetes. And you say, you know what? I think I've got muscle, right? Do I? How much muscle is enough muscle? Studies have shown that there is no upper limit to muscle, there is no upper limit to strength, and there is no upper limit to cardiovascular fitness. The benefits only continue as you get more and more and more. But let's say we're talking about minimals here, just absolute minimums. I'm going to quote Dr. Mike Israetel here in deciding whether or not you have enough muscle. And one of the baselines that he has is, if you look in the mirror, can you actually tell the different areas of your muscle? Can you see an outline of your shoulder, your bicep, your tricep, your chest, various abs? Not that you have to be like hard six-pack washboard abs, but can you see your quad muscle? Can you see all different muscles? Or are you just kind of one blob? Are you just kind of one smooth shape? That's bad, all right? You want to be able to see various muscles, at least minimally, all right? You should see some sort of outline that separates them. Are you strong enough? I'm going to quote Dr. Andy Galpin for how strong is like a moderate level of strength where we should at least be at a minimum. Can you bench press your body weight? Okay. Now that's the baseline for a man, I believe was his context when he was writing that. I forgot what the exact percentages are for women, might be like 55% or something like that. Can you leg press twice your body weight? Another good reference point, again, going back to are you strong enough, from Dr. Mike Israetel. If you were laying down flat on the floor, can you get up 10 times? So lay down flat on the floor, stand up, do that 10 times. Can you do that 10 times without struggling or needing major assistance? If you can't do that, that's a major issue, okay? Basic things. All right, body fat wise, how much body fat? All right. I'm reading a quick case study here. The primary purpose of this roundtable discussion of the American Health Foundation is to establish healthy weight standards for adults. In most large, long-term, well-designed studies, the lowest morbidity and mortality rates occurred in adults at weights that yielded BMIs in kilograms/M2 between 19 and 25. Best body fat percentages averaged between 12 and 20% for men and 20 and 30% for women. So if you're a man and you're above 20% body fat, you gotta slim that down. You're gonna open yourself up to a lot of those issues, a lot of those four horsemen that are gonna come and kill you eventually. If you're a woman, 30%, that's the high end, all right? All right, so let's talk about how to start gaining muscle. And again, this is gonna be oversimplified. We're gonna keep it super Bounty style basic. All right, so we build muscle from resistance training. Resistance training doesn't have to mean weights. It can mean calisthenics, it can mean free weights, it can mean machines, it can mean bands, some sort of resistance training. All right. Now, the issue here is that there's a lot of barriers to entry when it comes to starting off this journey, and that's what it is. It's a journey. So let's break down that journey and maybe make it a little bit more accessible. Barrier number one is motivation. If you have a motivation to to start this fitness journey, let's say, and your motivation is, I just want to get six-pack abs. I want to get bigger biceps. Well, if you're a 21-year-old frat boy or a little sorority woman, yeah, that's probably enough motivation for the time being. But realistically, that's not really who I'm talking to in this podcast. That's not really what we're looking for. We're talking about longevity, living a longer lifespan, but also a longer health span. So motivation should be, I want to live longer and healthier so I can play with my grandkids. That's a pretty powerful motivation. I just got some bad blood work. Looks like I'm pre-diabetic. I'm approaching type 2 diabetes. I don't want to get my foot chopped off because then I won't be able to do 90% of the things that I love to do. That's a really strong motivation. That's good. That is going to build adherence in the gym, all right? So you got to find your motivation. And it might just be honestly something as simple as I'm sick and tired of feeling like shit every day. Everyone else around me that I talk to feels great. I feel like shit. I don't want that anymore. That is going to vastly improve your day-to-day quality of life. All right. So talking about some of the barriers. Your exercise program, keep it minimal. Keep it minimal. Keep it simple when you're starting off. Okay. If you go online and you download the Navy SEAL preparatory program for warrior athletes, something like that, and it's a 3-hour workout that's just gonna break your body for the next 18 days, you're not gonna stick to that. That's ridiculous. Don't do that. Where are you going to work out, logistically speaking? Now, if you're like a corporate lawyer, you're an on-call trauma surgeon and you're working like 16-hour days, you're probably not going to have the ability to go to like a gym itself. All right, have a home gym. Keep it simple if you're just starting off. Maybe that works better for you. If you only work kind of a regular day-to-day shift, maybe you can sign up for a gym and you can drive 10 minutes to that gym. That's not bad. If your gym is 45 minutes away, an hour away, that's probably going to lead to some issues. I'm a big fan of the home gym. I had a lot of fun just remodeling my garage and creating a home gym. It's easy. I can literally walk out to my garage door and I can never give myself the excuse that, oh, I can't work out today because it's snowing out. I don't want to drive in the snow and it's just going to be a hassle. It's going to take me 30 minutes to get there. I don't allow myself to get that excuse. All right. Besides that, start with exercises that are fun. All right, exercises that are fun. Don't be doing things that are overly complicated or things that you just don't like in general. All right. Now, if you have someone to kind of build your programs and everything for you, then you're in a much better spot because then you can do the proper things and not have to worry about injury or stuff like that. All right, start with consistency. All right, so if you can dedicate 20 minutes twice a week, hey, I'm going to work out on Wednesday and I'm going to work out on Sunday. Boom. That's fantastic. 20 minutes twice a week. It's your first week working out, your first month working out. Awesome. Start there. Preferably don't start, I'm going to hit it hard 7 days a week, and then you're just going to get a real bad taste in your mouth about fitness and you're just going to give up. All right, that happens a lot. Then move on to duration of your workouts. Hey, you did 20 minutes. See if you can do 30 minutes twice a week. That's an hour a week. Are you telling me you don't have an hour a week to dedicate towards mitigating cancer, cardiovascular disease, neurodegenerative disease, and metabolic disease? That's ultimately going to crush you later in life and put you in a hospital bed for your last 5 years of life. You don't have an hour a week. I would be very, very curious to see what someone's schedule is that they don't have 1 hour a week to work out. All right. Besides that, it's all about small victories. This has probably been one of the number one motivations when it comes to working out, that from training various clients over the years that I've got, it's the small wins. You know, you start off and you can do 5 push-ups. You're like, oh man, shit, I thought I was way stronger. Holy shit, I am weak, right? And then the next week you do like 6 push-ups. Oh, this whole fitness thing actually works, right? You're training. You're able to do a few sit-ups, and now, wow, I can do double those sit-ups after a month, right? My back was feeling like it was like a 7 out of 10 in pain, kind of achy. Ooh, now it's only like a 6 out of pain, right? If you can get 1% better every week, why would you not start that journey? Why would you not? So those are those little tiny wins that keep building up, keep winning, all right? Be okay with a little bit of soreness. That's to be expected if you're starting working out. But if you're debilitated the next day and like you literally can't roll out of bed, that's an issue. Don't be working out. Don't do that. Hire a professional. You're doing something wrong if you're feeling that way. All right, talking about programming real quick. I'll blow through this because this could be, I could talk, I could do like a 12-hour TED talk on exercise programming, but we're going to keep it super basic. Decide on what your splits are going to be. If you don't have a lot of time to work out and you can only work out like twice a week, full body's the way to go. just do a full body program. If you try to do like, if you only have 20 minutes to work out like 3 days a week, and you do like biceps one day, chest, and then like quads, that's not a very fulfilling workout program. You're not really working what you need to work. Keep it basic. All right, what type of movements do we have to use? I am quoting Dan John and David Whitley over at Strong First, and these are the 7 basic human movements. You got to push, you have to pull, you have to hinge, you have to squat, do some form of loaded carry, right? So a loaded carry could just be holding dumbbells, and we're creating that axial load, stressing those muscles around the spine and really being able to work that. Some sort of rotation and some sort of counter rotation, okay? Those are the 7 basic movements as defined by Strong First, and I would personally add in there some form of movement, whether that be if you have an assault bike. I love the assault bike. It's 0 impact. If you have knee problems and stuff, it's no issue. If you want to do running, if you want to do swimming, something like that. Number 1 goal that you should be focusing on with your exercise program is to prevent injury. That should be number 1. Do not injure yourself. You will make progress. Don't try and make a bunch of progress. I think a lot of times we greatly overestimate what we can do in 2 weeks of training. Like, our expectations are way too high. Like, I should be waking up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger after 2 weeks, and you get disappointed. No, that's not going to happen. But I think we drastically underestimate what we can do in 6 months. And that's kind of where our mindset has to be, that long term. In 6 months, you can feel twice as good as you feel right now. In a year, you can feel 3 times as good as you feel, and you can look 3 times better, and you can be 3 times as metabolically healthy. I'm totally pulling that 3 times. That's an arbitrary number, but realistically, people feel exponentially better after that timeline. They look much better, and they're much more internally healthy. All right. And closing up the programming 101, what could a basic, and I'm talking about like day 1, you just started exercise, you've been just kind of getting away from it. What could it look like? It could look like going to the gym and going to a lap pool, like an LA Fitness or something. It could look like going to the lap pool there and doing 3 laps, 3 shuttles, I should say. There and back, rest. There and back, rest. There and back, swimming. All right, just getting that 0 impact aerobic, anaerobic exercise in. 3 full shuttles of swimming. That's like I don't know. I haven't time to swim in a while, but that's like 10 minutes of work, probably a lot less, right? And you get out of the pool, dry off, and you're done. It can be that simple. It could look like that could be one day. Another day, hey, I'm just gonna go for a 1 mile walk/run. So I get out there, I put my running shoes on, and I start to run. I haven't been working out for a while, and so I can only run for 20 seconds, and then I walk for like 3 minutes. And I run for another 20 seconds, and I walk for 3 minutes. And you do a mile, all right? That's, again, we're talking about like 20-minute workouts here. What else could it look like? Another day could look like, hey, I'm gonna do 10 banded chest press with your exercise band, 10 banded rows, and 10 bodyweight squats. And I'm gonna do that 3 times. Again, 20 minutes with some really good rest time in between. That could be your first week of training right there. It could be that simple. And that's what people don't realize. They think, again, they have to do this 2-hour Navy SEAL workout. No. Start small. You'll move up in time. Build consistency first. All right. Diet-wise, I'm not going to get into any diet specifics. I am going to say, don't eat garbage. If you're eating McDonald's, you're doing something wrong. If you're only eating 1 meal a day and you're trying to work out and build muscle, you're doing something wrong. If you are not eating protein in every meal, get your protein in there. All right. All right. Closing up the whole exercise thing, I think I want to bring up the number one reason why people don't work out, and I think that's because it's unfamiliar territory. I've been training people for many, many years, especially in the gym setting, and when I was a strength coach for the local wrestling teams, and being a personal trainer. And people are scared walking into a gym, and that goes whether or not it's a corporate gym with other people or if it's a home gym, because you're walking into this space and there's some exercise tools laying around, some dumbbells, kettlebells, stretch bands, and it's unfamiliar territory. And so people in general don't really like being confused, and they don't like going into unfamiliar territory, especially when we get older. We want familiar, we want comfort. You got to surpass that. That's all there is to it. You can hire a trainer. You can look up endless hours of exercise knowledge on YouTube. It's 2024. You can learn about these things online. You can read books. You can do whatever you want to do, but it's an intimidating place. And so start small. Start small and realize that the benefits are there. You shouldn't be trying to do power clean or Olympic snatches when you're starting your exercise journey. You shouldn't be doing that, okay? All right. This is going to be the last major study. Yeah, this is the last study that I'm going to talk about, and I saved it for last because it's kind of the culminating study. So we are going to talk about this study. I'm going to reference the word fitness in here a lot, and what fitness is it's our VO2 max. When we're talking about scientific studies, that's what fitness is synonymous with. It's this test called a VO2 max. Basically, it's a base indicator of your cardiovascular capacity. It's the size of your engine in here, all right? Basically, it's how you take oxygen from the air, you get it into your lungs, you get it to your muscles, and you have your muscles use it for metabolic processes and the actions that you want to do, all right? So this study is called Cardiorespiratory Fitness and Mortality Risk Across the Spectrum of Age, Race, and Sex. This is from the Journal of American College of Cardiology. It's a 2022 study. In the study, they had 750,000 people, and of those people, 175,000 of them died. Not due to the study, just because the study was so long in duration. There was that many people that died, which is good because we were able to grab statistics from those people that died and find out why they died. All right, the age range was huge, 30 to 95 years of age. So what we have here is the results indicated during a follow-up of about 10 years, 174,807 subjects died, averaging 22.4 events per 1,000 person years. The adjusted association of cardiorespiratory fitness and mortality risk was inverse and graded across the age spectrum, sex, and race. The lowest mortality risk was observed at approximately 14 METs for men and women, with no evidence of an increase in risk with extremely high CRF. Again, it's saying that CRF is cardiorespiratory fitness. There was no negative effects of having an extremely high fitness level, is what that's saying. The risk for least fit individuals, which is defined as the lower 20th percentile, was 4-fold higher compared to extremely fit individuals. So we're gonna dive into this graph real quick. And what I'm looking at here, it's a split graph. And what it's showing is comorbidities. Now, the comorbidities here, if we take a look at the graph, we have various comorbidities, that being hypertension, cardiovascular disease, cancer, all cancers, by the way, arterial fibrillation, diabetes, smoking, and at the top of the list, chronic kidney disease, which was a 1.49 risk factor in mortality. So 1.49, all right? Now, the second side of the graph up top shows fitness. It shows high fitness, somewhat fit, moderate fitness, low, and least fitness. So let me save us some time and just oversimplify this graph. We'll keep it basic. There's a lot we can dive into here, but I'll save you guys the time. The top of the comorbidities list was chronic kidney disease with a 1.49 risk factor in dying. If you are in the lowest fitness category, you have a 4.09 risk factor of mortality compared to 1.49. Basically, that is saying that it is safer to have chronic kidney disease. It is safer to be a smoker. It is safer to have diabetes than to be sedentary, than to be in the bottom 20th percentile of fitness. You are 4 times higher risk factor of mortality if you are not fit versus being only 1.3 something or 1.4 something if you have one of those comorbidities. I saved that study for last because I find that mind-blowing how dangerous it is not to exercise. And again, I really want to emphasize the point that I was talking about earlier. I'm talking about being fit and exercising. So that's talking about VO2 max and having muscle. All right, not just being active. It's easy to be active. Again, the construction worker. That person, he's doing stuff throughout the day, but he's not exercising and he's not building muscle and he's not increasing his cardiovascular fitness. Okay, so something to think about there. Anyway, just a crazy study. All right, I'm going to finish off the podcast here with some quotes from Outlive, the book by Dr. Peter Attia. Exercise is by far the most potent longevity drug. No other intervention does nearly as much to prolong our lifespan and preserve our cognitive and physical function. Another excerpt here. Another related issue is that longevity itself and health span in particular doesn't really fit into the business model of our current healthcare system. There are few insurance reimbursement codes for most of the largely preventative interventions that I believe are necessary to extend lifespan and health span. Health insurance companies won't pay a doctor very much to tell a patient to change the way he eats or to monitor his blood glucose levels in order to help prevent him from developing type 2 diabetes. Yet insurance will pay for the same patient's insulin after he has been diagnosed. Similarly, there is no billing code for putting a patient on a comprehensive exercise program designed to maintain her muscle mass and sense of balance while building her resistance to injury. But if she falls and breaks her hip, then her surgery and physical therapy will be covered. Nearly all the money flows to treatment rather than prevention. And when I say prevention, I mean prevention of human suffering, continuing to ignore health span as opposed to lifespan, as we've been doing, not only condemns people to a sick and miserable older age, but is guaranteed to bankrupt us eventually. There's another quotation by, I forgot if it was Dr. Peter Attia or Dr. Andy Galpin, but they were referencing how basically these illnesses, medical expenses, being hospitalized due to comorbidities is the number one reason for bankruptcy. Again, kind of going back to how exercise interfaces with our life. You built a life, you've saved up this money, you've paid off your house. You should be spending that money on travel, having fun, buying the things that you want to buy, providing for your kids and your grandkids, going on trips. You shouldn't be sinking it all into the healthcare system because you got sick and you didn't do anything to stop it. All right. All right, guys, that's it. In conclusion, I want to stress that nobody is debating the scientific research that we talked about today. I trimmed a lot of the case studies. I had like 25 case studies that I was going to bring up on the podcast, but it was going to end up taking forever. All right. But it doesn't really matter because they all pointed in the same direction and they all gave pretty much the same research. We have to exercise. Don't turn diabetic. Don't be a victim of one of the four horsemen. And the reason why we spend so much time on diabetes is because it's kind of like the kingpin of the four horsemen. It's contributing to all those. All right. And so let's make sure that we're not doing that. All right, guys, thank you for listening. I hope this inspired you to some capacity to go ahead and just start a basic fitness plan and just be able to live healthier, live not only longer, but live better. That is the goal, to live better. All right. I'll see you guys out on the trail. Maybe I'll see you in the gym, but enjoy.